sell the way people want to buy. My name is Scott Williamson. I'm the managing partner at Revinate. I've been working in the sales world for 25 years now in one form or another, either as a consultant or as a practitioner in the direct sales role, inside sales role, pre-sales, as well as being a sales leader as a vice president of sales and chief sales officer at a variety of companies ranging from startups to public companies. My goal today is to share best practices with you. Now, these are best practices that are gained from hundreds and hundreds of business-to-business sales pursuits from myself and from my partners at Revinate. In the course of doing this, we hope to teach you three things. The first is how to understand the client's buying cycle. The second is how you can identify common sales process problems and learn to fix them. And the third thing is how to better align your marketing and sales with your client's actual buying process. Now, if we can accomplish all three of these things, it will also help you close more work, near term and in the future. This is the fifth in a 7-part series of Revinate's Enterprise Sales Predictability Model. Now, our Enterprise Sales Predictability Model is based on three things, and all of them are what we call the abilities: visibility, reliability, and predictability. As a sales leader, you crave visibility. You need to understand what's going on in the market with your sales team, with the active sales pursuits that you're working right now. And you need to be able to do this in a very reliable way. If you can, then you have a chance of being able to predict. And with this predictability, it gives you what most people crave for, which is a sense of certainty of what the future will hold for you and for your team. Now, our ESP model has 7 different lenses that help people through that. It starts with the Salesforce structure, where we go in and make sure that you've got the right role definitions and that you understand how to organize your team to be able to capture the market. The second is the coverage model, which is a nuance off of Salesforce structure, which is to make sure that we understand the different market potential, be it in geographies or industries, and that we have the appropriate people focused on the right things. Third is sales process, and this is where we'll focus today. Fourth is sales intelligence, and that's where we look at the data behind the entire sales process to understand what our KPIs are and how are we tracking against those KPIs so that we can make smart decisions in a timely fashion. Last month, we covered quota and incentive, and the quota and incentive side of the world is making sure that we have appropriate goals at an individual field level, manager level if need be, and that we have people behaving the way we want them to based on a reward system. People enablement and development is focused on making sure that we have the appropriate sales coaching techniques in place to grow the skills of your team so that they can perform at higher and higher levels over time. And then finally, tools and technology enablement is focused on making sure we have the software and work aids in place so that your sales team can focus on the activities where they have the highest return. All of this is wrapped up together in our Enterprise Sales Predictability Program. And as I talked about, today we'll focus on the sales process side of the world. But before we do that, we have to understand that sales has a very, very large problem. And that problem is a problem of perception and reputation. Right now, the sales world is not looked at kindly. Far too often, we hear about people who are in the sales world who are viewed as being liars and being viewed as people who aren't ethical. They don't ask the right questions. They don't do the right things. They're constantly trying to do anything and everything they can do to get the client to buy and to buy now. And all we have to do to understand that this is a pervasive problem is look at media. Now, back in the 86 to 90 time frame, Isuzu ran a very, very clever campaign around Joe Isuzu. Joe Isuzu was a fictional salesperson representing the company who would go out in his very swarmy way, would represent the company and say anything and everything he could to finally get somebody to buy an Isuzu. Of course, what we all understood and the purpose of the entire campaign was that Joe was a liar. Isuzu was being very clever in saying that, using this form of comedy to show that they weren't lying about their products. But unfortunately, far too often we see salespeople who are lying. And I don't think it's a problem where salespeople are just inherently bad. I think it's a problem of intense pressure on people to hit their numbers, quarter over quarter, month over month, year over year, whatever the measurement period is. And far too often, salespeople aren't appropriately equipped with the tools and techniques to do the job the right way. At Revenade, we believe very strongly that sales and the sales profession is a very noble profession, and done the right way can lead to very great results. So let's focus less on the perception of salespeople not being ethical and lying, and let's focus on what the core problems are, how we can fix that, and how we can work with our clients as an advisor. Now, the biggest problem that we see with salespeople is that they don't understand that clients are only going to buy when they want to buy, not when we want them to buy. There's no magic wand that we can wave, and despite all the sales training and the tools and techniques and the tricks and all the various videos that you see on the internet, there is no magic to selling. It's like any other job. You have to understand what the goal is. You have to understand the parameters under which you play, and you have to do your best job. And the fact of the matter is that clients are more in control of the sales cycle than we are, and that's always the way it's going to be. Now, the leaders in the B2C market have got this figured out. We're showing Amazon here because we think Amazon is a fantastic example of a business-to-consumer oriented firm that understands how people want to buy. Amazon provides free and very abundant information on their website that gives you access into all of their products and all the various details on their products. But just in case you don't trust Amazon, Amazon also gives you peer reviews. So of course you can go in and you can see what people like you thought about the book that you're about to buy or the television that you're about to buy. And you can understand what other people are thinking and whether or not that product is worthwhile, and are you at risk if you do buy it. Amazon does a fantastic job at providing price transparency. There are no hidden costs. We understand what the tax is. We understand what the shipping charges are. We don't feel at the end of the day that Amazon's taking advantage of us. And finally, Amazon does a masterful job of making it easy to buy. I don't have to buy right now. There are certainly incentives for me to buy right now, and there may be incentives for me to buy in the future. But Amazon is perfectly content to let me buy when I want to buy. If anything, Amazon wants me to have a great customer experience so that I keep coming back to buy. So as we use this example with our clients and with our prospective clients, the question that we always get is, that's fine for Amazon, but we're not a business-to-consumer oriented company. We sell to other businesses. And really, B2C sales are easier, right? Well, we've often thought that that might be true, but we went ahead and did some research on this. And what we found is that, is it easier? Maybe. Business to business may be more difficult. B2C may be easier. They're certainly very different, though. That we know. We looked at 6 different dimensions, ranging from how many buyers are involved in the sales cycle to the size of the purchase itself in terms of dollars. We looked at the complexity and the type of the decision process. We looked at the relationship between the buyer and the seller and the importance of that relationship. We looked at whether or not the product or service could be returned after it was purchased. And then finally, we looked at the experience level required of the seller in this buying cycle. And as you might expect, in the business-to-consumer world, the number of buyers was very small. Typically, a B2C purchase involves one person, and in some cases, with large purchases, say for instance with residential real estate, it could involve 2 people. In the business-to-business market, there are by definition many people involved in any sale. In terms of the absolute dollar size of a purchase, certainly there can be business-to-consumer sales that are very large, but normally they're smaller dollar sales. In the business-to-business world, this is the opposite. Sure, there can be very small B2B sales, but for the most part, the purchases are high dollar amount. From a decision process point of view, B2C, because it involves one person and because the dollar size is typically smaller, it's usually an emotional sale. I decide that I want that pack of gum, or I'll go ahead and buy that book. But if I'm going to buy SAP or Oracle or some large $500,000 set of services from a consultant, I'm typically going to use a series of logical parameters to decide how I'm going to make that purchase. In terms of the relationship between the buyer and the seller, B2C is often a very low-touch relationship. With Amazon, I may have an affinity to Amazon because they're a good website, but I don't deal with any human beings. The relationship is strictly through the brand and not through the seller. With business to business, the relationship is very much through the seller. And even if I'm IBM and I've been around for 100+ years, if I have a bad salesperson come in or a salesperson come in who I don't relate to, I might decide to buy somebody besides IBM. Now, typically in the business-to-business world, you can't return a product or a service after you buy it. This is very different than the business-to-consumer world, where if I don't like the book or the shirt doesn't fit, I can typically return it within a certain set of days, provided I have the receipt. And then finally, in terms of the amount of experience required for a seller, in the business-to-consumer world, there's typically a low threshold. All I have to do is fill out the form, and provided I pass the background check, I can sell whatever it is the B2C firm is selling. In terms of the business-to-business world, though, there's typically a long learning curve and many years that go into somebody being expert enough to be able to be a seller at a business-to-business company. So as you can see, when you look at these things, some of the critiques that we've gotten from our clients are right. In some senses, the business-to-consumer world is much easier to sell in. But as you'll see as time goes by, there's a lot of similarity between these two types of sales. And in particular, the three areas that we want to highlight. The first is process. Every selling situation, every situation where a consumer is going to buy something involves a process. That process may be fairly simple, or it may be very complex, but there's always a process associated with this. And in the B2C world, people or organizations like Amazon have got this figured out very, very well. The same is true in the B2B market. There's absolutely a process involved, and we'll go through that today. The second thing is that there needs to be an alignment in the buyer's mind between the marketing messages that come from the marketing department and the messages that come from the salesperson. So sales and marketing need to be absolutely, completely in alignment when working with the customer. And the final thing is that in the hyper-competitive environment that we find ourselves in these days, service is a very, very important thing. Even commoditized products and commoditized services can be differentiated with a very strong client or customer service facing even during the sales cycle and beyond the sales cycle. So let's talk a little bit more about that then, and let's talk about where these very large, complex B2B sales processes run into problems. And the examples we're going to be using today are primarily software and technology service-oriented sales cycles. Most clients, unbeknownst to salespeople, have two buying cycles. The first cycle is where the client is buying into the idea, and the second is where the client is buying into the actual solution. So in the first cycle, the cycle that most people aren't aware of, the client is determining that they have a problem. They have a very distinct need, and the need has gotten to a point where they need to do something about it. From this, they typically go into some form of market research, and they look at different types of solutions that are out there on the market, and they try to investigate, can that solution help address my need? Now, they may go through certain demos, either online or in person, or if it's a services firm that's selling to them, they may go through a series of prolonged credibility-based conversations to understand if the service provider has the expertise necessary to be able to meet their needs. They might go to industry events or specialized technology events, but all this is done so that they can finally decide whoever the champion is for this particular problem inside the organization. So that person or that team can decide, yes, we buy into the idea that we can find a solution and that solution will meet our need. The final steps in this process, of course, are for that team or for that person to build the business case that will go to management and hopefully be approved. Now, if it is approved, we then enter into the part of the buying cycle that most of us are familiar with. An RFP is issued, a set of calls are made, more formal demos or a pilot takes place. Certainly the client's doing further investigation, but at this point our sales team is engaged and we're really selling them on the solution. Now, the key thing to think about as you look at these two buying cycles is that this is anywhere from a 12 to an 18-month process. Most people don't want to hear that. Most people want to hear about how we can turn a sale in 3 months, or God forbid it's the middle of the quarter and we're a publicly traded company and our sales management is leaning on us saying, you've got to close the next set of deals because we've got to hit our numbers. Like I said earlier, there's no magic wand on this stuff. Clients are going to buy when they want to buy and how they want to buy. And so the key thing is for us to understand this buying cycle. But most salespeople don't sell according to the buying cycle. They sell according to the sales cycle that their sales leadership has put in place. Sometimes this is enforced from a process point of view. Sometimes, and I hate when I see this, they go out and they buy a CRM system that enforces a certain sales process and they decide that's how they're going to sell to the client. But regardless, the sales opportunity funnel that I'm showing you right now is a typical one. It's fairly generic, but I would say it applies to most technology firms, be they software firms or IT service firms. And it's a process that typically lasts about 6 months in most clients' minds, where they go through and they qualify a lead. They do some basic discovery with the client so they can help them define the solution. This is typically where they're going through some form of demonstration. And at that point, the client says, I'd like to understand how much this is going to cost me. So they prepare a proposal. In some cases, it's a very formal proposal, an RFP or an RFQ or an RFI. In other cases, it's more informal. And then our bold sales team starts working with the client to get them to a decision so that hopefully they can negotiate the deal and win. Now, this sales process can work. In fact, there are many sales courses out there you can buy that will walk you through something like this. But they only work sometimes, and they only work when they just happen to align with the second half of the client's buying cycle. So if the client's already made up its mind that it will buy something, that it truly has a need, that there are viable alternatives in the market, that it has done the business case, and that this particular solution has a business case that's better than the other business cases that are being presented for seemingly equally beneficial solutions, then we have an opportunity to sell somebody on our product or on our service. Far too often, though, what happens is that we don't understand where the client is in the buying cycle, and so we have multiple disparate, scattered, random sales cycles. And these have a tendency to end up with a loss, or we disengage with the client and we're not really sure why. The typical symptoms of this, of these failed sales opportunities, include sales cycles that start and stop. So we may start a sales cycle with a client in April. In August, for some particular reason, we don't know why, it just stops. Or we may start a sales cycle with a client in April of last year, let's say, and here we are in August of 2014, and we're still trying to sell to that client. So the sales cycle has become prolonged or elongated. If we're a software firm, we may find ourselves demoing and demoing and demoing and demoing. We don't know why we're doing the next demo, but each time we do one, the client says, I just need to see one more thing. And it seems to be a lot like the movie Groundhog Day. Every day we wake up, we do another demo, and we're not really sure why. We may find ourselves continually having to provide business case information. This is a clear sign that the client hasn't sold this particular opportunity inside. The idea is not confirmed, and so they're trying to use us to help them build the business case. These types of environments end up having endless meetings, endless demos, and we never really seem to get any progress. In fact, we may have situations where client personnel come and go on a particular sales effort. So if you, in your sales efforts, are finding these types of symptoms, then chances are you don't have a full understanding of where the client is in this buying cycle. And there's a misalignment between our selling cycle and their buying cycle. So let's think a little bit about how we can fix this misalignment. We need to find a way to gain control of the process. Now, this may seem contradictory to what I said earlier, when I said the client is always in charge of the sales process. Well, they're not in charge of the sales process, but they are in charge of the buying process. Our challenge is to figure out how we can get those two things aligned. And in the course of doing that, find a way to regain control. The first thing that we recommend is to understand your funnels. Now, that's not a typo. It's not supposed to be understand your funnel, your sales funnel. It's understand your funnels. In fact, what we found through our research is that there are 4 distinct funnels in a buying cycle. There's a marketing funnel, a lead development funnel, the sales funnel that we're normally calling the funnel, and then for existing clients, an account growth funnel. And what you'll see is that within each of these different funnels, there's something different that we need to do. There's a different way for us to think in terms of the client's needs, and there's a different way for us to reach that client. Now, for the purposes of today's conversation, we're primarily going to focus on the first 3, the marketing, lead development, and sales funnels. So the way we want you to think about this, and the way we found is most successful with our clients, is first and foremost, think in terms of what the client cares about in order to define and determine where they are in these funnels. If the client is really focused on us giving them expertise and ideas and helping them with the basic problems of whether or not we can even conceptually solve their problem, then they're in the early phases. And this is where marketing is very, very useful. Yes, we can have our salespeople engaged with them and spending a lot of time with them. And we'll see some techniques here in a little bit where we do recommend having salespeople involved at this point. But it's much more beneficial to the overall selling organization if the marketing department can be focused on using the web, social media, advertising, events, and very targeted campaigns to different audiences to send certain types of messages around how our product or service can solve certain problems. Now, the one area that we're going to stress in a couple of slides is the relationship side. Salespeople certainly within their target accounts have the ability and should be focused on working with clients this early on, but they should be working in conjunction with marketing in such a way where there's a unified message. If your client's asking you questions about alternatives to their problem and how much does it cost, it doesn't mean they're about to buy, but it is a good sign that they're getting closer to understanding what this solution might look like. So they want to know the various alternatives along with the costs associated with that, so that they can then go back and help build the business case. Now, telemarketing can be very useful when we reach a client at this stage. And this is typically where our telemarketers are trying to figure out who the various contacts are inside the buying organization, so that we can start to round up what the image might look like inside that buying organization as to where they are and how far they are in the process. Events and campaigns rather, are also extremely useful in this cycle. If your client is starting to ask very, very specific questions about your particular solution and how it can work in their environments to meet their budget and do it with less risk, if they're asking questions that lead you to believe, can they really trust you and where have you done this before, then you could be on the cusp of the sales cycle, or you could very well be in the sales cycle. So certainly referrals and relationships are going to be important at this point in time. Lead processing can also help, and events and campaigns can be good reinforcement techniques. So let's think about, if we understand where the client is in terms of our funnels, how do we match that to where the client is in his or her buying cycle? We talked earlier about the first buying cycle being where the client is really trying to sell the idea internally, or they're buying the idea. And in this case, marketing and sales have to be working in lockstep with each other. Marketing has hopefully done its work and has created an awareness of our brand that was separate and apart from any particular client buying cycle. So within our target base of potential clients, marketing has been working to send the messages out there about the problems that we solve, so that when the client realizes they have a need that they think that problem can solve, they will think about us. Lead generation at that point can be engaged to establish contact with the client. And if the sales organization doesn't have a lead generation force, or if the sales organization is so inclined, the sales team itself can be engaged to establish a relationship. If that does happen, though, we strongly recommend that the consultants focus on acting like a consultant, or excuse me, that the salespeople focus on acting like a consultant as opposed to a traditional salesperson. As the client starts to work its way through its own buying cycle, marketing is going to continue to work with sales and lead generation. In this case, as the client is looking at different solution alternatives and demos and research and so forth, marketing is switching its focus from the types of solutions we have to how we solve the client's particular problem. Lead generation is continuing to maintain contact and be the foot soldier for the sales team, but sales at this point should be growing a relationship. And this is the first opportunity for sales to either qualify or dequalify a client. There's no point in spending a long, protracted amount of time with a client if the solution they're looking for is not something that we have a good chance of providing. If we do have a solution that we think fits, then here's where the sales team needs to focus on determining the core problems and framing the process for which we'll solve that problem. When we get into the cycle of the client putting its business case together, this is where marketing can help in terms of providing reference information of where we've helped other clients with similar problems. So having the appropriate case studies, return on investment, business value analysis and evaluations already in place will really help your sales team so that they can go forth and grow their relationship from being a consultant to more of an advisor as we start to help our client build the business case and frame their solution vision and then frame their decision process. Now, lead generation in this process can be very useful to extend into other contacts because oftentimes building an initial business case is going to be a very political process. And so understanding how other people feel in this cycle can be very useful. Now, as we work our way into the second half of the buying cycle, in other words, where the client is actually buying the solution, we're focused on brand reinforcement from marketing and making sure that we're selling the company and not just the solution. Because ultimately, we want the client to buy the salesperson, the solution, and most importantly, the company. The salesperson at this point has grown into an advisor, but it's also a chance for the salesperson, again, to qualify or dequalify an opportunity. You might be asking yourself, why are we qualifying twice? We've already qualified. Well, keep in mind this is about a 12 to 18-month process for most technology or large IT service firm sales. And so in this case, many things could have changed, both at the buying company and at the selling company. So we want to have an opportunity to reevaluate. Should we decide that we want to continue working with this client, then what we need to do is reinforce the messaging from a sales point of view with demonstrations and a variety of different solution meetings if we're an IT-oriented firm. When we get to the last two stages of the client's buying cycle, we're really focused now at how we differentiate. And what we're seeing in the market, both with software firms and with IT service firms, is that you need to establish a client service framework. In other words, the client needs to see that once they make the purchasing decision and they buy your product or they're using your services, they need to feel like your company is going to be with them for the long haul. And so this is most likely one of your key win themes, and it's something that your normal sales activities should be focused on to drive this particular opportunity to close. So as we wrap up and think about this, the key lessons here are that there are two client buying cycles. There's the first cycle where the client is buying the idea, and then there's the second cycle where the client's buying the solution. Far too often, our salespeople get focused on the buying the idea cycle, thinking it's the buying the solution cycle. And they waste time, money, resources trying to sell to somebody who's not ready to buy. Successful salespeople, on the other hand, understand where the client is in the buying cycle, as well as, of course, understanding the buying cycles themselves. They understand their own internal selling cycles, and they can align those two in such a way that they can match up the right resources at the right time to help the client through its buying cycle. Now, I know we haven't been able to cover everything that certainly I wanted to cover today in this short period of time, but we have literally weeks and weeks, if not months worth of material that we could share with people if there was time. So should any of this have raised some questions in your mind, or if there are additional areas that you'd like to speak with us related to this, please reach out to me. My contact information is on the screen right now. You can always send me an email, or you can call me on my cell phone, which is listed again on the screen. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was of use to you, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thank you very much.